I'm Elise. I stepped off the train with the kind of silence that only comes after war, not the kind with bombs and bullets, but the kind that changes the way your lungs fill with air, the kind that makes even the sound of birds feel intrusive. I had not been home in nearly 4 years, not since I deployed for the last time, not since I chose distance over obligation. Station was still the same, small rusty signs, the faint smell of old coffee and dirt. The air was thick with the weight of July heat, the sun settling just over the trees like it always had. My boots made dull thuds on the platform, and no one was there to greet me. Not that I expected anyone to be. When I was 15, I had already decided I would leave this town. When I was 20, I left and never really looked back. My mother cried when I got on that bus that first time. My father didn't. He only said, "Well then, that's that," and walked back into the house. My sister Claire stood on the porch with her arms crossed, pretending like it didn't matter. I didn't say goodbye, not really, no. I was 28 and coming back, not because I missed it, not because I wanted to, but because my mother was dead. They told me it was sudden heart failure in her sleep. No pain, just darkness. I received the message while stationed in Ramstein. I stared at the screen for a long time before I even moved. I did not cry, not then, not even later. I had learned early that crying never brought people back, it only made the silence louder. The cab ride from the station to the house was quiet. The driver didn't ask questions. He only glanced at me through the mirror a few times, like he was trying to figure out if he recognized me. Maybe he did. Small towns don't forget faces, even if faces try to forget them. The house looked smaller than I remembered it. The white paint now chipped, the roof sagging slightly over the porch steps. The garden was overgrown, and the fence that used to be bright blue was now a muted gray. Nothing had changed, and everything. Hottie stood on the front steps for a long time. The key still worked. The door creaked open slowly, as if it too hadn't expected me back. The air inside was stale, smelled like dust and silence and forgotten dinners. My mother's presence was everywhere, in the worn couch, in the framed pictures on the mantel, and the way the kitchen towels were still folded just right. Her scent was gone, though, no trace of lavender, no hint of her perfume, only dust and memory. Claire was already there, of course. She had been staying with our father since the funeral. I had not seen her since before I deployed. She looked thinner, colder, like all the warmth had been drained out of her face. She hugged me briefly, then pulled away, like touching me was an obligation. Didn't speak much that first night, not more than necessary. I sat in my old room, which still had the faded posters and the bed that creaked with every breath. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence. It was thicker than anything I had known overseas, heavier than any bunker. The funeral had already happened by the time got there. No ceremony, no crowd, just a quick burial. Claire said Mom didn't want a big thing, just family, just quiet. I didn't believe that Mom had loved people, loved laughter. She would have wanted music, flowers, stories. Claire didn't look me in the eyes when she said it. My father looked older than I remembered, his hair now fully gray, his shoulders slouched. He barely said a word to me. He just nodded and returned to his chair by the window, where he sat staring out, like waiting for something that would never come. I tried to ask him questions about Mom, but he deflected every time, said things like it was her time or she didn't suffer, as if that answered anything. I found myself wandering the house at night, unable to sleep. The kitchen cabinets still held the same cups, the drawers still had the same mismatched spoons. I opened one of the boxes in the hallway closet and found old documents, letters, cards from me when I was away, each one neatly stacked, tied together with a ribbon. My mother had read every word I ever sent. She had kept them. Aldi will came up a few days later. Claire said it had already been sorted, that Mom had signed everything months ago, that she and Dad had taken care of the legal side. I asked to see it. She hesitated, then said it wasn't necessary, that Mom had left the house and everything in it to Dad and Claire to make things easier. She said because I was always moving around, because I had my own life now. He didn't argue, not at first. I just nodded, felt something hollow settle in my chest, something too quiet to name. It didn't make sense, but grief makes everything blurry, and I wanted to believe that maybe it was true. Maybe Mom had made that choice. Maybe she didn't think I'd want it. But at night, when The world was still and the house creaked like old bones. I felt at the cold crawl of doubt. Remembered how Mom used to talk about fairness, how she believed in sharing and balance and making sure both her daughters would be taken care of. She wouldn't have just left me nothing, not without telling me, not without a word. The more I thought about it, the more things began to tilt like a picture frame that's just slightly off the center of the wall. Too subtle to notice at first, but once you do, you can't stop seeing it. Claire avoided me more and more each day. She said she was busy, said there were errands, always something to do. She started locking drawers, shutting her laptop quickly. When I walked into the room, her eyes darted too fast. When I asked questions, her smile was too tight to control me. Father was no better. He shuffled through the house like a ghost, said little, slept less. I started to wonder what he was afraid of, what they were both hiding, and I knew I would find it, whatever it was, because the silence had started to speak. Grief has a way of blinding you, softening your logic, dulling your instinct. I had trained for years to read the signs of danger, the shift in tone, the twitch in the jaw, the glance that lasts 1 second too long. But back home, those senses were dulled, buried beneath the weight of loss and a childhood I had tried too hard to forget. He woke each day in that house feeling like I was slipping into a version of myself I no longer recognized. I wore civilian clothes, but they didn't fit right. I moved through the halls like a visitor, not a daughter, not a sister, just a shadow retracing its old path. Claire was always up early. I heard her every morning pacing through the kitchen, tapping her phone, whispering into it like she didn't want the walls to hear. Sometimes she would leave without saying where she was going. Other times she'd say errands again, always errands. He started asking questions gently at first, what needed doing, what was still unfinished. After Mom's passing, she always had an answer, always too quick, too polished, too ready. I knew that kind of readiness. I had worn it myself on base when the truth was too dangerous to say out loud. One afternoon, I went into town alone. I told Claire I needed air. She didn't stop me, only nodded and returned to whatever she was typing on her laptop. I walked through the streets of my childhood and tried to find something familiar, but everything felt thinner now, faded with age and memory. Stopped by the courthouse. It was a quiet building, almost forgotten, at the edge of town. Asked the clerk if I could view the public will records for my mother. I gave her the full name, date of death. She looked at me with curiosity, then typed into her terminal slowly, as if doubting the outcome before it appeared. She frowned. There's nothing here, she said, at least not from this year. The last record we have is from over a decade ago, back when your parents refinanced their property. I asked her to check again. She did. Same result. Left the building with the same heavy silence pressing on my shoulders, the kind I knew all too well from patrol nights, the kind that meant something was coming. I walked back home slowly, rehearsing how I would ask again, how I would press Claire without starting a war. That evening, she was in the living room with her laptop open, some spreadsheets, some emails. I sat across from her and waited for her to look up. She didn't. I asked her again about the will, the paperwork, the lawyer, anything. She sighed, closed her screen, finally looked me in the eye. She said everything had gone through Dad's contact, the lawyer he used for years, someone in the next county. She said Mom had told them what she wanted and it had all been handled cleanly. Months before her passing, I asked for the name of the lawyer. She said she didn't remember. She said Dad had all the paperwork, but Dad didn't. Dad said Claire had it. Claire said he had it. And suddenly I was back in briefing rooms watching suspects dodge responsibility, toss the blame like a live grenade no one wanted to hold too long. Started searching the house piece by piece, not obviously, not in ways that would alert them, but slowly, drawer by drawer, closet by closet, looking for a single page, a signature, anything that would confirm what they claimed. I found nothing, no legal documents, no wills, no lawyer correspondence, not even a receipt from a consultation, nothing but old receipts from grocery stores, expired coupons, and a few dusty cookbooks. He began taking notes, writing down everything I saw and heard, the names Claire mentioned on calls, the times she left the house, the things Dad said when he thought no one was listening. Patterns started forming like footprints in wet sand, easy to miss unless you were trained to track them. One night I overheard Claire on the phone. She was in the backyard, pacing near the fence, her voice low but firm. She said something about finalizing papers and making sure Elise doesn't get involved. She said she can't prove anything, she's just guessing. And she'll go back soon enough. I stood by the window, not moving, not breathing. Next morning, I confronted Dad, asked him straight if Mom had truly excluded me from everything. He didn't look at me, just said things were complicated, said I had always been gone, that Claire was the one who stayed, the one who helped, the one who was thorough. Asked if that meant love was a currency, if presence meant ownership, if absence meant erasure. He didn't answer, he just turned away, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time, not since the first time I was ambushed overseas, not since I bled into the sand and thought it would be my last breath. I began to feel rage, not hot and wild, but cold, focused, surgical. If they thought I would walk away, they didn't know me at all. I stopped hoping for the truth to come to me. I started going after it like I had done before, with intel, with men in uniforms and secrets buried in places no one wanted to dig. I became that version of myself again, the one they had trained, the one who didn't blink when it got ugly. Drove 2 towns over to find the lawyer Claire had mentioned. I tracked his name through an old contact from base, a friend who still owed me a favor, a database here, a whisper there. It wasn't hard to follow their steps once I stopped pretending they hadn't lied to me. His office was on the 2nd floor of a building that smelled like old paper and sweat. He didn't recognize me at first until I gave him my mother's name and said I was here about the will. He shifted in his seat, his mouth twitched, then he said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you without written consent from the clients." I asked who the clients were. He hesitated. I looked him in the eye and said, "I already know the answer, Claire. And my father had come to him 3 months before Mom died. They brought a signed document, said my mother wanted to leave everything to them, only them. The lawyer had processed and no questions asked. He said it was all in order, notarized, signed, sealed, clean, but something was wrong. I could feel it in my teeth, in the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, in the way he started sweating even though the room was cold. Asked to see the original file. He said he couldn't without approval. I left without shouting, without breaking anything, because I had learned long ago that patience was a better weapon than fury. Back home, waited until night, then went into the garage where Dad kept old boxes he thought I'd never touch. I found a file labeled estate. I opened it with gloved hands and found copies, not originals, photocopies of the will with dates that didn't match the day Claire claimed they signed them, dates that overlapped with the week Mom had been in the hospital quietly. Not dead yet, but Fidinji checked the medical records. Next, I had them sent to me through a contact in base hospital administration, an old roommate who still trusted me. The timeline was off. Mom had been sedated the day that document was supposedly signed. She had been unable to speak, let alone read. I stared at the files for hours, my hands steady, my heart dead quiet. I didn't cry, not even then. I felt something colder than grief move through me, something sharp and exact. Betrayal wasn't a punch, it was a scalpel. It sliced with purpose and precision. Claire came home late that night. I waited in the kitchen, the documents spread out before me. She froze when she saw them. I didn't say anything for a long time, just watched her eyes go wide, her jaw tighten. Then she said, "It doesn't change anything, Elise." She said, "You left, you were never here. Mom wanted peace. She didn't want to complicate things with you." He asked her if that was what she told herself when she forged our mother's signature, when she watched her sedated and dying and used that moment to take everything. I asked if that was what she told Dad to make him sign with her, or if he was just as greedy as she was, tried to play the victim. Said I was overreacting. Said I didn't understand what it was like to be the one left behind, the one who had to clean up everything, fix everything. I told her she didn't fix anything, she only buried what she couldn't. Fasesh left the room, said she didn't have to listen to this. I didn't follow her. I just stared at the documents, the ones I had now copied, scanned, encrypted, saved to drives in 3 different places. The next morning, I confronted my father. I laid the documents out before him, told him I knew everything. He didn't deny it. He just looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen him. He said it was easier this way. He said Claire was struggling. He said I had a career. I didn't need the house or the money. Asked him if he had ever loved me, or if I was just a soldier to him, a name in a letter, someone he could be proud of at parades, but not in the will. He didn't answer. Not really. He just Said I made my choices and they made theirs. That's when I knew they wouldn't undo it. They wouldn't feel guilt. They wouldn't hand anything back. The only way to take back what was mine was to take them apart carefully, one thread at a time. I went to the notary who had allegedly stamped the signature. He was a man in his 60s, shaky hands, too many years of quiet corruption. I showed him the signature, said it was forged. He flinched, said nothing. I asked if he wanted to be involved in a federal fraud investigation or if he wanted to tell the truth. He said he didn't know what he was signing that day, that Claire had rushed him, told him Mom couldn't make it, that it was all urgent. He recorded everything, audio clean, clear, admissible. I added it to the file I was building, not just against Claire and Dad, but anyone who had helped them. Lee started tracing the bank transfers next, the sale of Mom's stocks, the closure of her savings, the transfer of funds into Claire's account, into a new joint account with Dad, all done within 2 weeks of Mom's death, all papered over with signed permissions that I now knew were fake. He didn't go to the police, not yet, because I knew they would stall. They would ask for proof, for chain of custody, for motive. They would drag it out and Claire would find a way to cover her tracks. But I was already ahead of Harry. Contacted a private investigator, a man I had once worked with overseas. He owed me a favor. He traced Claire's communications, found deleted emails, found backup drives, found conversations between her and the lawyer discussing how best to present the will, how to justify my absence as abandonment, how to explain away my silence as consent. The evidence piled up, and I kept it all tucked away, locked tight, with names, dates, signatures, photos, everything that would turn their world inside out when the time was right. But I didn't move yet. I waited. I watched. I learned that Dad had started planning to sell the house, that Claire had listed some of Mom's jewelry for auction, that they had already split what they stole and were now working on turning it into cash. Before I could stop them, he played dumb. I smiled. I ate dinner with them. I listened to their stories and washed their hands for towels, watched the way Claire's voice pitched higher when she lied, the way Dad's eyes drifted when he was cornered. I documented everything. I was building a case not just of fraud but of character, the kind that would destroy them in court and in town. He started leaking information anonymously, emails to former friends of Mom, to the local paper, to distant cousins who had once trusted Claire. I let the whispers grow into questions. I let suspicion bloom like mold in a dark basement, and they had no idea it was me. Cracks began to show. Claire started locking her room. Dad started double-checking the mail. They argued more. I could hear them through the walls, fighting about the house, about what would happen if I found out, about what I might don't. Still, I waited, because revenge wasn't just about taking something back, it was about making sure they never forgot what they had done. It was about silence used as a weapon, precision over passion, strategy over pain, and I was just getting started. I stopped thinking of it as revenge and started thinking of it as reclamation. What was stolen from me was not just property or inheritance, it was memory, it was belonging, it was the last piece of my mother that I still believed in, and they took it and called it necessity. They took it and told themselves they deserved it. But I had worn uniforms stitched with silence. I had watched men lie with medals on their chest. I knew what it looked like when someone convinced themselves their actions were noble, when their corruption was painted as loyalty. I had seen it before in different countries, in different languages, and I had dismantled it every to me. So I began from the beginning, not with rage but with preparation. I moved back into the house, fully claimed my old room as mine, unpacked as if I had no intention of leaving again. Claire didn't like it. She didn't say it, but I could see it in the way her jaw tightened every time I opened a door she thought was hers. She kept a low profile, smiled when I needed to, nodded when they spoke, moved around the house like I was still lost in grief, but in my mind I was mapping their routines. Claire left the house every other day, usually around the same time. She always returned with the same bags, groceries mostly, but never let me see the receipts. I began tracking her locations using a GPS tracker I installed under her car bumper, a simple device, a gift from a former friend in tactical logistics. No questions. A sketty setup, an old laptop in my room connected to an encrypted drive. I stored everything, their emails, copies of documents, voice recordings from my phone, every word, every phrase, every glance that mattered. I began organizing it all into folders, labeling each 1 by date and content. Claire, lawyer, bank dad, notary, forged will asset transfer, fraudulent signature. A found an old friend from the base station stateside, now someone in cyber forensics. I told him it was about a civil matter, family related. I sent him encrypted copies of the will and the notary stamp and asked him to verify their metadata within 2 days. He replied signatures mismatched, timestamps altered, PDF creation logs showed manipulation. The file had been edited 3 separate times after the date of finalization. Date was enough to crack the foundation, but I wanted more. I wanted the truth to bleed out of every corner they had tried to bury it. Eni returned to the lawyer's office, this time not as a grieving daughter, but as a professional. I presented him with a formal letter of intent to pursue civil and criminal charges. I listed the forged documents, the manipulated dates, the witness testimony from the notary who had already confessed to me in private. I told him that his name was included in every file and that cooperation was his only option. Folded quickly. Fear has a way of revealing who people truly are. He handed me the originals, quietly unsigned versions, the ones my mother had actually discussed with him prior to her hospitalization. The documents showed equal distribution between me and Claire. The house was meant to be shared, the stocks split, the savings dividend. Me mother had tried to be fair and they had rewritten her love into betrayal. Took those papers and filed them away, scanned them, uploaded them to my cloud, and locked them behind 3 layers of security. I wasn't ready to release them, not yet. Dad started acting differently around me after that, as if he sensed something was changing. He began asking more questions: where I was going, what I was doing, if I had spoken to anyone about mom's things. I told him I was just cleaning, organizing, helping out before I left. Soon, that word soon was a weapon, and I used it well. The idea of me leaving kept them calm, kept them off balance, kept them from realizing that I was building something permanent right beneath their feet. He found their financials, Claire's credit card statements, Dad's retirement account shifts, withdrawals, large transfers hidden behind shell business names. I traced them all, flagged each one, recorded the trail, followed the money into Claire's new private account, opened just weeks after mom's death, the same account she used to pay the lawyer to expedite the fake will processing. One night, I followed Claire in person. She drove out to a nearby town, parked near a commercial office building, stayed inside for over an hour, waited in my car, engine off, lights out, watched every movement. When she came out, she was carrying a folder thick with papers. She looked nervous, her head turning too quickly, her steps fast. I followed her home, kept my distance. She never saw me. Later that night, I went into the garage again, found the hidden cabinet she thought I didn't know about. Inside, I found copies of the same folder I'd seen earlier. It contained property evaluations, bank correspondence, even email printouts detailing sale plans for the house and other assets. Claire had listed them already, was planning to sell even before the year was up. She was erasing every trace of my mother and doing it under both our names, using a fake power of attorney document signed with a date that matched the day Mom had been in intensive care. Unconsciously stared at the signature and felt something crack, not break, just crack, the way glass sounds when you apply pressure slowly. It wasn't rage, it was something colder, deeper, something ancient that sits inside you and waits for the right betrayal to awaken. He went outside that night, walked the perimeter of the house in the dark. The stars overhead were clear and still, the way they had been the night I left home at 18. I remembered standing on this porch with my duffel bag and thinking I would never come back. And now I was here again, not because I wanted to be, but because something in me refused to let them win. Next morning, I contacted a lawyer of my own, not a local one, someone from another state, someone with no ties to this town. I laid it all out: the fraud, the forgery, the stolen inheritance, the altered documents. I sent him the files, the recordings, the logs, the testimony. He said I had more than enough for a civil suit and possibly criminal charges as well, but I told him not yet. I wasn't finished. Headcounts, taking them down in court, wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they couldn't rebuild what they destroyed. He contacted the local reporter, the one who wrote pieces on community affairs, small town scandals, nothing big. I sent her an anonymous tip, told her to look into property disputes involving forged documents, told her to check the notary public records, the name, Claire, the dates. I fed her just enough to start the fire. By the end of the week, whispers had started again. People asking questions, quiet conversations at the grocery store, the post office, the bank. Claire's name was in them all, and she didn't know why. Watched her unravel piece by piece. She became erratic, checking the locks twice, snapping at Dad, avoiding my eyes when we passed in the hallway. Dad started drinking again, just like when I was little, when he didn't know how to deal with problems except by disappearing into a bottle. I waited until the house was empty one afternoon and printed everything out, each piece of evidence, every lie, every theft, every manipulated form. I put it all in a thick envelope, sealed it, and placed it on the kitchen table with a note written in my own handy. Know everything. That night they came home to silence, but the kind that screamed when they found the envelope. Neither of them said a word to me. They avoided me for days like I was a ghost, and that was fine because I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to finish what they started. There's a moment just before impact when the world holds its breath. I've felt it before on missions when you breach a door and the seconds stretch like wires before they snap. I felt it again now, that same weightless tension, only this time the breach wasn't a wall, it was blood, it was silence, it was the space between me and the people who raised my. Woke before dawn and sat in the dark watching the lines of shadow move across the ceiling. The plan was already in motion. I had sent the documents the previous night, copies of everything in carefully marked envelopes, one to my lawyer, one to the district attorney, one to the tax office, and one to Claire because she deserved to see the blade before it touched skin. Went through the house like always, poured my coffee, moved quietly, stayed invisible. Claire didn't know yet, neither did Dad, but they would. The knock came around 11 to men in suits, subtle, polite, not the kind of knock you kick a door in with, but the kind that comes with clipboards and calm voices and questions that already have answers. He watched from the kitchen. Claire answered the door. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see it in her face. The color drained slowly like a leak, like a sinkhole opening under her ribs. Dad came out of his room, stood behind her. He looked confused, old, more like a witness than a criminal. They were there for information, not arrests. Not yet. They asked about the will, the property transfers, the financial transactions. Claire tried to sound composed, but her voice shook. I could see it from the hallway, the way she clutched her arms, the way she kept blinking fast like she could erase what was in front of her. They didn't stay long, 20 minutes maybe, but that was enough. After they left, Claire slammed the door and went to her room, locked it. Didn't come out for hours. I heard pacing, drawers opening, paper rustling. She was looking for something, maybe a way out. Dad came into the kitchen later, sat down across from me without saying a word. His eyes were glassy, not from drink this time, but from something else, something heavier. He asked me if I was the one who started it. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, let the silence do the work. Nodded slowly, then said I should have come to them. I should have talked before going to outsiders. He still thought this was about communication, not theft. He still thought this was a misunderstanding, not a betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up sorting the files one more time. There was nothing left to add. Everything was documented, dates, transfers, the forged signature, the fake power of attorney, even the notary's confession. I had the chain of custody, the metadata, the motive. Everything, even their lies, were accounted for. Next day, my lawyer called, said the DA was interested, that this wasn't just civil anymore, that tax fraud, document forgery, and financial manipulation could escalate. Said subpoenas were being prepared. Said Claire and my father might be looking at charges if things moved forward. He asked if I wanted to push or let it go. I told him to push all the way. Claire tried to confront me later, stood in my doorway with her face tight, jaw clenched. She asked how I could do this to family, how I could bring strangers into our house. I told her she invited them when she signed our mother's name while she was dying. I told her I wasn't bringing strangers, I was bringing truth. She didn't respond. She just walked away and slammed the door. Againi knew she would try something. She was desperate, cornered. People always are. She started calling the lawyer again. I could hear her through the wall, talking fast, asking about revisions, about strategy, about options, but there were none. She had run out of shadows to hide in. By the end of the week, the official letters arrived from the court, from the DA, from the bank. Freezes were being placed on certain accounts. Investigations opened. The local paper ran a small article, not names, not yet, just a headline about a contested estate, potential fraud. Whispers became louder. The town noticed it at the grocery store. People looked at us differently. Some avoided us, some stared, the kind of stare that asks, What else is true? What else have they lied about? Kept my head down, didn't speak more than I had to because I didn't need to prove anything. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Dad started unraveling slowly. He stopped shaving, stopped leaving the house, sat in his chair all day watching the window like he could undo everything by staring hard enough. Claire tried to act normal, tried to keep up appearances. She even hosted a dinner one night, invited neighbors, cooked, laughed too loud, but I saw her hands shaking, always shaking. She knew it was over. Me lawyer called again, said a court date was likely. Said Claire's legal team had reached out for settlement, offered to return half just to make it go away, declined. It wasn't about money anymore, it was about everything. They erased the house, my name, my mother's trust, every letter she ever wrote me that they hid in a box. Every memory they tried to rewrite, every signature they forged. I wanted them to face it in full light. No settlement would erase what they did, only consequences. Well, that night, I left a copy of the original will on the kitchen table, the one with my mother's signature, the real one, split 50-50. I left it there without a word. When I woke up, it was gone, but they never asked about it. They just stayed quiet. That was enough. The trap was set. They had walked into it with their eyes open. Now I just had to wait. Victory never looks the way you imagined. It does not come with applause or a sunrise or any great moment of cinematic triumph. Instead, it arrives slowly, without noise and without permission, and when it does, you are already too tired to celebrate it. I spent those weeks in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted every word to land where it mattered, not in this house, not to them, but to the system that would finally see what I had seen from the beginning. Claire stopped looking me in the eye altogether. She moved like a ghost in the hallways, her presence now an echo of her own schemes. Dad spent most of his time asleep or pretending to be. His guilt was not explosive, it was quiet. It was the kind that sat inside a man like rot and ate him slowly from within. When the summons was officially posted in the newspaper, our last names sat there in black and white: inheritance fraud, financial misconduct, forgery, elder exploitation. And when the neighbors read it and began to talk, the story was no longer mine to carry, it belonged to everyone else. Now I met with my lawyer in person for the first time since I returned to town. He laid out our argument point by point, every forged signature, every manipulated document, every financial transaction that violated federal law, every testimony I had gathered, every recorded conversation, every timestamp. He said it was airtight, said he had never seen a family case with this much weight behind it. I asked him if we would win. He said we already had. Claire hired a defense attorney from out of town, a kind that charged for every hour, and smiled with teeth too white. She arrived at court 2 days early, trying to negotiate, trying to offer settlements under the table, trying to rewrite history one more time. I declined again. No deals, no silence, no split money. I wanted every detail in the record, every fact acknowledged by a judge. I wanted accountability, not compromise. That night before the hearing, I walked through the house one last time, every room, every corner, the light in the hallway, the broken drawer in the kitchen, the closet where my mother used to keep old birthday cards. I didn't touch anything, I just looked, let the memories rise then fall without chasing them. I found my father in the living room, sitting in his usual chair. He didn't speak when I entered. I stood there waiting. He finally looked up, his face pale, thinner than I remembered. He asked me what I wanted truly. What did I want from all this? I told him I wanted the truth to matter. That was all. The morning of the hearing was cold gray, the kind of sky that offers no comfort, no promise. Claire sat across from me in the courtroom. Her lawyer whispered constantly. She stared forward, her hands clenched. The judge entered the room, and suddenly everything became real. My lawyer presented our case first: documents, timelines, testimony from the notary, digital forensics, from the will, audio from Claire's call that night in the yard, the medical records showing my mother was incapable of signing anything on the date listed in the false document, the financial records showing the funneling of funds into Claire's personal accounts and the asset transfers into joint control. With my father, it was surgical, clean, undeniable. Claire's defense tried to discredit the evidence, claimed it was a misunderstanding, a family miscommunication, an error in timing and memory, but the judge didn't flinch, didn't buy it. The questions were direct, the answers stumbled, and every time they reached for justification, The facts stood in their way when the ruling came. It was quiet, no one clapped, no one gasped. It wasn't dramatic, it was decisive. The will was declared fraudulent. The original reinstated Claire was ordered to return every cent plus damages. My father was found complicit, stripped of his administrative rights over any family assets. Both were referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges pending further investigation. I stood still when the decision was read, not because I was shocked, but because I had already lived this moment 100 times in my mind. Only this time it was real, and it came without rage, without triumph. Just relief, like setting down something you've carried for far too long. Claire didn't look at me as she left the courtroom, her steps fast, her eyes low. Dad didn't speak to me either, his face blank, as if he still hadn't processed that it was over. But it was. I walked outside alone, the wind sharp, the sky still gray, but somehow it felt different now, like the weight had shifted, like the ground under me was finally steady. Againi moved out of the house that same week, packed quietly. Didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. They didn't deserve one. The house didn't feel like mine, and I had no interest in trying to reclaim it. It wasn't about possession anymore, it was about peace. I rented a small place near the edge of town, near the woods, where the silence was clean, not suffocating. I started running again every morning before the sun came up, just me and the cold and the road. No memories, no noise, just breath and ground. I kept the documents locked away, not because I needed them now, but because I had earned them. Every signature, every timestamp, every truth I had dragged into the light. I kept them as proof that I hadn't imagined it, that it wasn't just pain that had distorted everything. A few months later, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. Claire had taken a plea deal, admitted to the forgery, accepted a suspended sentence, paid restitution. Dad was deemed unfit to manage his own finances, placed under limited guardianship by the state, his retirement accounts frozen under review. None of that changed what had happened, but it meant it was no longer Baridi. Didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I came to say, in silence, in patience, in truth. Sometimes people asked what happened between us. I never answered directly, just said we had grown apart, just said I had nothing more to say, because some victories don't come with declarations, they come with distance, with stillness, with the knowledge that you didn't let them win. My mother's name was back on the record, her wishes restored, her love no longer rewritten by greed. I visited her grave once after the ruling, stood there in the cold, and told her quietly that I had done what I could, that I had come back, that I had stayed, that I had fought not for revenge but for her and for me. And then I walked away, not broken, not bitter, just free. Thanks for listening to my story with me. Don't forget to like and follow for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and deception.